we've all heard the story of Jack and the Beanstalk, and I found this book, Shaq and the Beanstalk and Other Very Tall Tales, and I just love it. And I want to read you a different version, Shaq and the Beanstalk, but let me read you a little bit over here on this page. Dear reader, as you can probably guess, I used to be a kid myself. I wasn't always 7 feet tall. I didn't always weigh 300 pounds, and I certainly didn't start out as a pro basketball player. I was lucky. I grew up in a loving home where my parents read to me a lot. Even today, those are some of my favorite memories, sitting snugly on my mother's lap, listening to her read a wonderful story. Even though I love the pictures, I would sometimes close my eyes and let the words pour over me like the words to a song. With each story, I would visit new worlds and meet new characters, and I suppose that my favorite stories were the classic folk tales like Jack and the Beanstalk, Little Red Riding Hood, and the Emperor's New Clothes. I believe everyone has their own stories to tell. These are mine. I hope they make you smile. Your friend, Shaquille O'Neal. Thank you for Shaquille O'Neal for doing this. It seems like everybody has heard the story of Jack and the Beanstalk. It used to be one of my favorites, but that was before I met a real giant. Believe it. He was one huge, scary-looking guy. Anyway, now I have my own Beanstalk story. I call it Shaq and the Beanstalk, and it goes like this. When I was a little guy, just 7 or 8 years old, I was a big-time fussy eater. Raise your hands if you were a big-time fussy eater then. Sure, I like candy and pizza and pancakes and hot dogs well enough, but when it came to vegetables, I'd just as soon eat one of my smelly old basketball socks. I wouldn't eat broccoli. I sneered at cauliflower. I held my nose when spinach appeared on my plate, but one day everything changed. Right then and there, I guess you could say I became a world champion eater. Do you see Shaquille dressed here? Here's what happened. One night at dinner, I was playing with my lima beans, sometimes we call them butter beans, wishing they would disappear. Problem was, we had a rule in my house, no dessert unless you finished your dinner. That meant all your dinner, even if it included yucky green lima beans. To make things worse, we were going to have one of my all-time favorite desserts, my great-grandmother's homemade pound cake. What did I do? You guessed it. When my parents weren't looking, I tossed those lima beans right out the window. We could see them doing it. I sat down to a plate of the best pound cake in the world, all the while thinking I was pretty smart. But let me tell you, those lima beans nearly got me flattened like a pancake. Believe it. When I woke up in the morning, I looked out the window and saw a great big plant growing high into the clouds. It was in the exact spot where I tossed those beans. Now, the next day before, I'd banged my head in a pickup basketball game, so at first I thought that my mind was playing tricks on me. After all, who had ever heard of a gigantic lima bean plant? I got out of bed, ate breakfast, and forgot all about that crazy stalk outside the window. But when I ran outside to play, there it was again. The thing is, it was a Saturday, so there wasn't any school. I looked at that lima bean stalk and figured, okay, I'll go. In no time at all, I was climbing higher and higher, past the tallest buildings, past a gaggle of geese flying, and in that perfect V formation. I was so high that I started getting dizzy. But I kept right on climbing because I like to finish things once I start them. Just like with basketball, I play hard until the buzzer. The final buzzer. Finally, I got to the top. It was pretty strange, I'll tell you what. I was in another world where everything looked like the pictures in a storybook. No trash, no ugly billboards, and no noisy cars. In the distance, I saw a glistening castle built on clouds. Now, that's something you just don't see every day. I figured I'd check it out. And to tell you the honest truth, all that climbing made me hungry. I was hoping to catch a snack. I walked and walked until I came to a humongous wooden door. Look how big that door is. I couldn't even reach the doorknob, so bangity, bangity, bang, I knocked. In a minute, a voice, a deep voice, as loud as thunder boomed, "Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the socks of a little man. Be he clean or be he smelly, I'll soon have him in my belly." The door swung open, and there before him stood the biggest big man I'd ever seen. I'll tell you, if this guy had skills, he would have done well in the NBA. Anyway, the giant stomped his foot and yelled, "Not another one of you pesky little people. I'll eat you up." Now, I've done some dumb things in my life, but I wasn't about to wait to see what happened next. So, quick as a flash, I tied the laces of his shoes together, then I raced between his legs into the castle. When the giant tried to take a step, and whoosh, he tripped and fell with a thunderous thud. After a minute, his face turned red, then purple, then blue. He was plenty mad. The giant fumbled to untie his laces. I'm not sure what he did next because I was too busy zooming off into the next room. Let me tell you, he had me running all over that castle, up the stairs, downstairs, into the kitchen, out of the kitchen. Man, I felt like I was running a fast break with the Lakers. When I ran into one room, I saw the weirdest thing. It was a hen sitting in a nest. Underneath her was a pile of golden basketballs. That's right. You heard me. Golden basketballs. Not like the original story with the golden eggs. Yep, that was no ordinary hen, so I snatched up a basketball and took aim. And let me stop and say one thing right now. I have always believed that fighting is not the best. I've always believed that fighting is the loser's way out. You get nowhere using violence. It's always better to talk your problems out. But this giant didn't seem to be in the mood for conversation, so I had to fight back. So whap! I hurled that golden basketball right between the big fella's eyes. Lights out. The giant went down for the count, and after that the hen started getting sort of nervous. She started flapping her wings like crazy, and then she raced out the front door. Oh well, I had other things to worry about. Maybe another guy might have crept away with some of the giant's gold, but that's not my style. I don't take things that don't belong to me, even if they are solid gold basketballs. Instead, I found some rope and tied up the giant until he couldn't move. The giant's eyes slowly opened. He looked at me and boomed in a loud voice and says, "Fee, fi, fo, fum. I say if you're peanut butter or if you're jelly, I'll soon have you in my belly." Of course, I laughed. Because, hey, this particular giant was all tied up with no place to go. "Don't be ridiculous," I said. "I'd give you a stomachache." The giant tried his best to escape, but I tied my knots good and tight just like my dad Sarge taught me to. Finally, the giant gave up. Soon we got to talking, and it seems this giant, his name is George, never had any visitors. That's because he hated little people. Little people like me. Well, here's the thing. This giant's Uncle Max once ran into some trouble with a little fella. You probably know this rascal's name. That's right. It was Jack himself. If you remember the story, Jack climbed up the beanstalk and did some horrible things to that giant. Think about it. Jack stole the giant's gold coins. He stole the hen that lays the golden eggs. He took the giant's prized magical harp, and then he chopped down the beanstalk right where the giant was when he was climbing down it. Ever since, all the giants far and wide have kept their doors locked, no visitors allowed. I told George that all little people weren't like Jack. "Look at me," I said. "I'm a nice guy, and to prove it, I'll even untie you." So I did. But when George stood up, he was dizzy. He rubbed his head right where I nailed him with the giant basketball. Just then, George saw the empty nest. "Here, chick, chick, chick," he called out. "Here, my little chickie." "Are you looking for that hen?" I asked. George nodded. "Well, she ran out the front door fast as lightning." George's face turned 3 shades of red. "That was my prize hen," he screamed. "You made her run away." I gulped. I was thinking that maybe I shouldn't have untied George after all. He said, "Now George is mad. George likes to stomp when he's mad. My Uncle Max was right," he added. "You little people are nothing but trouble." Things weren't looking too good for me. George was one angry giant, so I said, "Listen, big fella, I'll prove to you that's not all little people are trouble. I'll find your hen. It was a deal. If I found the hen that lays golden basketballs, George wouldn't stomp me. Then he added one more thing. He said, I'm supposed to deliver cookies to my dear, sweet old granny, but now I can't, so you'll have to. Sure, I wasn't crazy about becoming the giant's delivery boy, but it sure beat getting stomped like a grape. Plus, it sounded easy enough. All I had to do was deliver a basket of cookies to his grandmother. Then I'd go and find that hen. How hard could that be? As I left for my journey, I turned and called to the big fella. I'll be back with that hen, George. I promise. Right after I deliver the gift basket to your dear, sweet old granny. As it turned out, my simple errand turned it out to be quite an adventure. Read on, and you'll see what I mean. Here's Little Red Riding Shack. That's where we have to stop for today. Thank you for listening to one of my favorite books, Shaq and the Beanstalk and Other Very Tall Tales.